gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Pastor Albo. Esilaba. So maybe we'll start with introductions with your family here, extended family.
Awesome.
Salamu alafu introduce your people.
So good. I want to say thank you so much for having us over. I want to introduce my family. My wife, and she goes by Mudeu Esilaba. I'm asking you to stand up. And my three boys, Bulamu, Seo, and Tetezi. I think there's a photo of them somewhere. We were here for a wedding.
Boys,
please stand up. Please stand up.
Watoto wa maju, simama.
By the way. Yeah, you guys may have your seats. My wife serves as one of our teaching pastors, and we have 7 locations in Michigan, and she's also responsible for all of kids and students for all campuses. So really, God has allowed us to be located and just walk through the doors that he opens.
Amen.
That's how it was worked out.
Excellent. Yeah. I see Edda's sisters here. Joy and your family, do you want to just stand?
Absolutely.
No pressure, we're just waving. These ones are based in...
this is part of our family.
Part of our family.
They're based in the UK right now. They've also globetrotted in the UK. Glad to have them here.
So 8.5 years in the States. I'm curious, maybe, we were expecting a little bit of an accent, but,
Let me tell you, when you are a Muluya, you could try all the accents, but it does not work. the Luya tongue is a little on the thicker side. Actually, what my American friends have told me is when I try to speak at my normal, faster pace, they tell me they don't understand me. So they actually tell me, just slow down your words a bit, because they're saying, we feel like what you're saying sounds like you're very convinced about it. But we don't understand what you just said. Like they feel like they should do something about what I've just said. They just don't know what. So we say that you can take a Luya out of Luya land, but you cannot get a Luya out of him. Actually, for all the Luyas in the house, I want to apologize. I misrepresent you in America. I really do.
Oh,
because,
how so?
Let me tell you a story. One of them, us Luyas, whenever somebody tells you the cost of something, you always negotiate, right? Where are my lunches in the house? It is right? You have to negotiate. So I went to buy tires, juicy, and I went to buy tires for my car, and the guy told me the cost of the tires. In my head, I'm thinking, this is a whole acre in Rongai. I'm going to spend on tires. There's no way. So I started negotiating. I was like, dude, man, let's not start up there. I gave him my cost, which was half what he offered. And he looks at me like, where do you come from? He doesn't know that there's a place called Luyaland where you negotiate for everything. We do. So the guy continued to just tell me, sir, we do not negotiate the cost as is. But one of the mistakes he did, he came to me like one of the supervisors of the store. When he's a supervisor, in my head, I'm thinking, if you're the supervisor, you must know how to get me a deal in this thing,
Yeah.
So the other mistake he did is that he was impatient. And that time, when I go to buy tires, the one thing I have is time. I'm from Africa, we have time. So I started negotiating with him. There's a line building up behind me, and I knew he was going to break because he'll begin to see all the other people who he could serve, but he can't go around me. So he has to deal with this Luya man. So finally, he got so frustrated. He reduced his cost a bit. I was not moving. He reduced a bit. I was not moving. Finally, got frustrated and decided we're going to toss a coin. He decided if I win this toss, you go with my cost. If I lose, then, I pay whatever, the other one, okay? So we tossed a coin and I lost.
Okay.
But then I told him, but sir, when you offered to toss a coin, you were willing to lose. I'm not willing to lose. So we're going to start again. He just gave me my cost and we malizana there. So if you need someone to negotiate for you, the Luyaness is economically beneficial.
This is true, and I've witnessed this. I visited with them last year, and I wanted, where did we go? You took me, we went to Best Buy.
Yeah.
I was buying a gadget. I'd saved up for a gadget, because it's cheaper out there, and then you sneak it. You know how you sneak it back in? For my socks, boxers.
My boxer, unafunga na boxer.
You put the gadget in as you come into the country because why not, right? And then, because taxes, and then, we are told the price, and Albo just begins to bargain. And I did not know you can bargain in these places. And it was a long one. It was even at some point, I was like, I'm the Kenyan now. I'm originally Kenyan, and I'm tired. Give the guy the money. But we got a good price. And asante for that. Albo, So 8 years in the US. Tell us a little bit about, the place that you're serving in, the context that you guys are serving in. First of all, you left to Wisconsin,
Yeah.
And then later on to Michigan. How'd that
So
go?
some of you may remember those days. We had a church that we were friends with called Elmbrook Church in Wisconsin. So my wife and I, 2006, 2007, went there for a little bit to just experience ministry. We were done with Next. It was called Next then.
Yeah.
And the idea was to experience what we can and come back home, which we did. We came back home and then planted XP, did all the other things, Rongai and all. And then they invited me back. At that time, my wife could not work. So they invited me back to be the missions pastor.
So which year was this?
This is 2014 is when the invite came. We ended up going there 2015.
2015.
Yeah.
Aye.
So my role was essentially to take this church that had not planted for about 9 years and to start a new culture of church planting. And that was not easy because if you've not planted for 9 years, you've forgotten how to plant churches. And not only that, this church was an exceptional church. It had missionaries pretty much every corner of the world. We had about 75 missionaries. You name a place, there is a person from that church who has been sent to mission. Similar to what we're doing here, that church has done that from 70s and 80s and 90s, sending people out everywhere. But then they just were finding that while they were being powerful and effective on the global scale, they were not powerful and effective on the local scale. They were declining. And we decided, hey, why don't we start a new church planting movement in the midst of that? In the midst of that, we planted a few churches. My role was quite a fun role. We were identifying new congregations. My job was to start them out. If there's no pastor, I become the pastor of the church until we find somebody, and then I leave them leading that and I move on to the next one. Phenomenal time. But in the midst of that, my friend who was at that time the senior pastor had moral failure. And that really, really shook the church. And what happened with that is that it made sense to my wife and I to actually leave the church because we were so close. My friend and I were so close that when I walked into the room, people were reminded of his moral failure. It got to the place where I felt like church planting and his moral failure were linked together. And we felt as a family that it is helpful for this church to slow down and heal fast. And then for us as a family to go and partner with other people who are interested in church planting while this church is healing, because we could not be there. We could not be there. It was not going to be kind of us to be present when we were such a stark reminder of the moral failure of my friend. And it's not gossip or anything. It is out there. Everybody knows about this moral failure. So that's how we ended up at 242.
Yeah, because me, I don't like...
You don't even know, right?
I'm saying knows me, I... So how many years were you at Elmbrook?
Well, Elmbrook for 4 years, and then
4
moved
years.
to 242 for 4.5 years now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So. Tell us about that community, the place
Right.
you're in. It's Ann Arbor.
I say it like a Louis Anaba,
It's Ann Arbor.
but my son say Ann Arbor.
So.
Yeah.
And I saw Arbor is like from Arboretum.
Yeah, it's a city. It's called the city of many trees.
It's many trees. It's true. So it's like there was an Ann somewhere.
There's an Ann who I think
In the trees.
In the trees.
Sound. That's a place. By the way, if you've been there, it's interesting. It's like I remember thinking it feels like Germany. There's many trees everywhere, and But so the context where you're serving in, what's the culture like? What are the people like? Are you the only Africans there?
Where we live and where we work are different. So where we live, we felt like we actually, our family doubled the population of black people in our city when we moved in. So it was like, who are these people? Us guys, we were just going to buy a house where we thought we could afford.
Yeah.
In fact, I asked somebody asked me, hey, where did you move to? I told him, we live in a city called Hamburg. They asked me, why? I did not know what they mean. But because we were clearly a minority there. But where we are 20 minutes from Ann Arbor, which is where I work, where the church is.
Yeah.
And I want to say about Ann Arbor, it's a university city. University of Michigan is a big university. There's another university, Michigan Eastern University. It's a big university city, and typically in our context, university cities are considered places where they push different agenda, especially a progressive agenda. So we come from a very conservative view of family, sexuality, marriage, and all these things. But many times in these places where people say, these are an educational learning institution where all agendas need to be pushed. So we live right in the core of one of the most progressive cities. And you can imagine with that, the churches there are still trying to figure out how do we present ourselves with the truth of Scripture in a place where Christianity is actually held in quite a bit of suspicion, and sometimes it's even considered like sharing your faith can be considered an infringement into somebody else's space or their rights.
You've used the word progressive.
Yeah.
Unpack that kidogo for us.
Progressive, basically, what you're talking about when it comes to some of the big issues, when you talk about abortion, when you talk about LGBTQI conversations, those are, they lean a lot more on the liberal side. So they are very strongly, the culture as a whole is generally affirming.
Yeah.
But it's very deceptive because that is only at the center core. You drive 10 minutes outside my city proper, and it actually the culture changes. So my congregation is actually a melting pot of people from every belief background you can imagine, people who hold strongly to a traditional view of marriage, family, sanctity of life, but also people who are very progressive. And now we're trying to figure how do we form a community of people who have such a diversity in their belief systems and are trying to form one community as a church. Yeah.
So those things are like, you know, that like that's Sunday church for you. I mean, you're constantly or regularly experiencing these types of challenges. I mean, can you go like, are you talking about like if you go to church, kids camp, you have kids who are transitioning and that kind of thing?
That is a common conversation. Our students, pastors are constantly trying to figure out, what do you do? What do you do when you go for camp and somebody says, hey, I do not want to be in the hostels of the people who identify biologically as myself because I identify different in terms of my gender. So the funniest thing about this, Andy, people talk about the LGBTQI conversation a lot, and sometimes they can miss out on the idea. I find that this conversation about sexuality has become so elevated that when I look at my congregation, I look at other couples, heterosexual couples, and I realize that we have not had space to talk about how are you doing in your marriage as a heterosexual couple, because everyone avoids conversations about sexuality. And what our senior pastor has been really good at is in allowing us as a church to put our stance out there very clearly. Because where I serve, truth and clarity about what you believe is considered kindness. If you think that you're just going to come and maybe try and blend in and tell people maybe our standards have changed, at some point somebody will say, actually you are not true. Because they will read the Bible for themselves and they'll say, hey, you either believe in this Bible or not. And so our senior pastor has been very good at allowing us as a church to put ourselves out there and say, we will present the full truth of the Bible, but as part of that, we will also present ourselves as among the most loving people you could ever find, because that also requires you to believe in a big God. So for you to have a good balance of both truth and grace, you have to believe in a very, very big God.
Okay.
And that has been very freeing for me, that I've needed to actually trust the Bible even more in terms of what God's design is, but then at the same time trust that I do have the capacity to love people who I would otherwise not think that I could have even proximity to. And God has given us the grace of being able to see that happen within a context where I work.
Yeah. All right. Amen. Santi. Two more questions, then I'll have you just share a bit of what God has put in your heart to share for a few minutes. There is, I think you've been involved with a lot of the individuals, couples that have left and moved to the US, either to work, either for work or for church work, or just somebody's professionally going to work in the NGO world, in the bank or whatever. You've been in that process of helping people settle. What are some of the, if somebody's sitting here and thinking, maybe God is calling me to move to somewhere, and maybe even the US, what have you seen are some of the challenges that people experience as they, transition to those places?
There's quite a few. One of the most common things I hear from my friends, and I have a group of people we meet about once a month, and we talk about what has your transition experience look like? What are you experiencing as you move to a new culture? A couple of things they say is, one, the things we used to do in Africa, in Kenya, in Nairobi, don't work anymore. And they do not know what to do with that. The creativity you thought you had that was very, very effective in Nairobi, you plant it in a different place and it suddenly does not work. how do you have a faith and a ministry when you are unsure about your strategy? The other thing I hear people say a lot is, man, when they were in Kenya, there's a lot of things they used to pray about because there was not enough resource. You just have to be on your toes in prayer. And then they go to a place, some places where there's a good enough resource that they don't need to pray about those anymore. And they're finding that their prayer life has just dwindled to almost nothing because it has been taken away and but sabotaged by availability of resource. And now they're finding themselves living a powerless life over time. And how do you wrestle with that? And then there are some other practical things, like how do you parent? How do you parent? I know some of you who might have known the context of in the US, parenting younger kids through their earlier years is difficult because it's very expensive. How do you explain to your friends back home that while you go to a place where on Facebook all your photos look amazing, but you look at your bottom line at the end of the month and you are worried because you're finding that you are not able to afford life, even though you might be earning more than you earned in Kenya, your quality of life has lessened. You have more stress. And also, you are isolated from people. You know, us guys, you know our house, eh? Our house was the one where people show up at our house without announcing. Just because they are our friends, they don't even call prior because they know, see you at home. They can see you on, your shared location.
And see that you've cooked.
Yes, you have cooked.
Yeah.
See this.
That was us. We don't knock.
I remember coming to my house one day and coming down from, we had hosted some friends, and then us guys told our friends, yeah, you guys keep hanging out, us guys are going to bed. And then the next morning, I was coming downstairs to have breakfast to go to church. I saw somebody on my breakfast table I did not even recognize. This is here in Kenya. The guy just greeted me nicely, hey, hello, Pastor Albo, and he continued. He went to the kitchen, made for himself breakfast, and he was gone.
That is an angel.
That is up.
You don't have discernment, Baba.
The angel is supposed to be providing food, not eating my food. And that sense of community, which we consider so natural, and then you are in a place where you are finding, for you to find community, you have to really, really go out of your way. And especially, the small things when, this might sound very shallow, but when people don't understand your jokes, you think you're funny.
Me, I'm funny, eh?
Yeah, you think you're funny.
Me, I'm funny.
And you crack a joke, and then, the laughter, when people give you that laughter for, first of all, there's a pause because they're trying to understand, was that a joke? What was that? And then they give you that laughter for, or when they're looking at your lips, because again, Luya accent. I'm sorry. It's a bit of a thick one. And you are finding that you thought you were a good communicator. I've had people needing to come alongside me and tell me, Albo, I know what you said and I know what you mean, but I need to help you pronounce such that the people in the room can understand you. The gospel is dependent on this, by the way. And I've had to be humbled. I had a friend of mine who said, I will love you with the love of Jesus Christ. And his role in my life, every time I taught on a weekend, every time I shared anything, he used to record it. And then you sit down with me and say, now this vocabulary you're using is from the UK. People did not understand you. So let me update you. And that the struggle of feeling, I used to feel like I'm a good communicator. Now I have to speak slower, I have to get a new accent, I have to get a new vocabulary and stuff like that. Those things, they look so small, but they threaten and make you feel like you don't have it together.
I hear you, man. Once in Australia, I confused some people in how I pronounce something. They had S-H-I-T. I meant S-H-E-E-T. So the conversation was, they were like, this pastor is, in Africa they say these words like this. Yeah.
And there's some cultural things. Here in Nairobi Chapel, let me tell you, if you're considering ministry in Nairobi Chapel, one of the things we say here is, if we challenge you to do something big, the way how I planted Rongai, it was out of a casual conversation. September 2011, we were just hanging out with Bishop Oscar, a bunch of people, and somebody said, Albo, you look bored. You should go plant a church. That is how. 3 months later, I was planting it. It was just very much like, just go plant. Yeah. So how us guys knew, here in Nairobi Chapel, if we challenge you highly, that means job security. It means we trust you. We trust that God will work through you, and you will figure it out up ahead. Yeah. I had a team, I'm thinking that's how I communicate to people. job security. One of the churches we planted, I had some staff there. I was meeting with them, and this one person I felt like I need to speak into their life. So I did what I know, speak into their lives. I told them, hey, you've been doing this role and you've been doing pretty well. I trust God that you could be doing this thing in addition to what you're doing. And in my head, I'm thinking, I'm communicating a sense of affirmation, a sense of like, you have job security here. 2 days later, I get a resignation from them. And I did not realize that because where they're coming from, what I was communicating as affirmation was they considered me to be setting them up to fail.
How now?
They're setting me, because they were
Even
saying
me, I'm
you're putting me in a place where chances are I will not succeed, and you will use that as an opportunity to say now you're not thriving in this new season, chomoka.
Oh, I see.
And what I did not know is what I should have spent time doing is to get to know this person deeply. So many times one of things we're dealing with when you shift culture is not right or wrong. We're just dealing with two good principles and values that you now need discernment of saying, hey, between affirming somebody and calling out on them, or encouraging them and getting to know them, what should you be doing? And I realized I was too quick in just saying, I'm just going to plug and play my Nairobi Chapel mode and assume they'll be fine. Everybody will see, woo, woo, I've got job security. No, they understood that I was threatening their position, and basically I was setting them up to fail.
Interesting. So serving in a different culture is not, has its own challenges.
It does.
And we recognize that there are some of us here at Nairobi Chapel who are serving in Kenya, maybe, through job or you came here through marriage or something. We just want to recognize that, thank you for being missionaries here. God has sent you, for whatever reason, to be here, and we recognize the international community among us. If you're a member of Nairobi Chapel, but you come from another country and you're here, please stand. We just want to celebrate you. Some of these challenges are maybe perhaps what you're facing, but and we recognize our international community. Yes, people from Ethiopia and different countries. Watu wa majuu, karibu. We recognize your ministry to us as Kenyans. Now, Albo, 2 more questions. I think, let me squeeze in a question about, have you ever at one point felt like giving up and coming back home? Just, yani tu umehata home and you're like, manze, kwani hao si wa Kristo huko, let me get back home.
There's been many moments like that. One of them has been, there was a time my wife could not work. And I could see her stress. Some of you know her. She knows she likes to work. She likes to be out there in a place of influence. And because of a visa restriction, she was mostly at home. And we needed it. We knew we needed it. She needed to take care of our kids because we did not have any other option for childcare. But those were hard days when you've got somebody who's gifted, and many people will experience that. You go, you're gifted, you know the things you've done in the past, and yet no one can acknowledge them. You can't actually apply them.
Yeah.
Those have been hard. There are moments when I've shared about just the challenge of community, not finding people who, people who you can laugh with to the core of your heart, people who understand you. And what that has changed in me, I have grown in my respect for missionaries who have served here in Kenya. I can't imagine what I've needed to go through living for some years in a place that is culturally not their own.
Yeah.
And you need to explain to people why some things are so important to them, and for us, small things, food, stuff like that. You just there's a moment you're craving just food.
Mutura?
Mutura. There's no mutura. Nowhere we can get mutura.
There's Bowas.
No, that is not mutura. In fact, my guy of mutura is another guy, either in Karinde, near next. The best mutura in the universe. That guy, Ayoshi Sana. Ayoshi Sana. So good, Yeah, but those are some of the things, but then there are heavier things, and many people struggle to communicate to their people back home, like, I'm struggling, because your family knows, hey, you made it, but you do not know some of the headwinds you're facing, and you do not know where to process those.
But there's grace.
There is grace. I want to tell you, there's Kenyans. I met a friend who said every time he has met with Kenyans who are working in the US, he said, Kenyans have hustle. Kenyans have hustled. They apply themselves thoroughly. I've got pastors who are thriving. they're figuring out how to do this. They're figuring out how to navigate all these challenges and thriving immensely, planting churches left, right, and center. It's phenomenal.
How has this changed you, finally?
Many ways. One, I've needed to believe in the Bible even more. I've needed to believe in what God says in this Bible even more, because, especially as I shared earlier, where I serve, people want you to be very clear about your convictions. If you're wishy-washy about your convictions, they will hold you in suspicion. So I've needed to be very clear on what the Bible says and to believe stronger in the Bible, but also I have needed to understand that no one is too far for God to reach. Because I've met people and I'm like, this one will not work with our church. This one, I can tell you, they'll be here 2-3 weeks and they will start walking away because of the things we're preaching about. And then I've watched the Lord transform people right in front of our eyes. And I wish I could say it's because we are doing it well. No, it's just simply because that's how God works. He reaches out to people who everyone has put a label on them. And He has allowed for our church to be the kind of place where everyone who might be kicked away from everywhere else will find our home. We will stay with you through your unbelief, through your hating on God, hating on church. We will stick it through with them up until the point where they say yes to Jesus. And some of them don't do that quickly. So this year we're celebrating to date, among our churches, about 150 baptisms just through the time.
Amen.
I'll tell you what.
Yeah.
For us guys, baptisms, because we don't know when this person is going to come to church next. We just never know. So if you say yes to Jesus in our services like now, if you say yes to Jesus now, we will fungua this carpet again and we will baptize you. Because we don't know. We don't know when you'll come to church next, or if you have a church you'll go back home to. So we'll baptize you there and I'll have to tongea baadaye.
What? It's nice to have cars. If we baptize somebody here going to a matatu, you give them...
There's a t-shirt, there's shorts,
there's
towels.
Yeah. You have clothes for them.
There's clothes.
Things like that. Okay, so I'm going to... Nimeona your vision. So, Albo, let me thank this man for his ministry here in Kenya years ago. Asante sana, Albo.